Welcome into episode 445 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, today I am recording live from parts unknown. I feel like I am in Shawshank Redemption. I am so tight in this booth right now. I know that listeners are probably thinking I'm in jail or something, which wouldn't
Are
be
you in a
surprising.
closet?
No, yeah, I'm under the stairs like Harry Potter. I got Dudley
Okay,
sitting
Dobby.
above me. Yeah. No, I'm in the local.
That was the best room we could afford to have Brian set up across from Warrior. He's spying on everyone going in and out, trying to nail down this coaching search.
Yeah, I've had a fake mustache. I've been leaning back in my front seat so people don't see me, even though they have no idea who I am. I just feel it needs to be disguised. Don Sweeney could literally see me and have no clue who I am.
He's just a guy from Southie over here, just walking along.
Yep. No, I'm recording from a local Sheraton in beautiful Nashua, New Hampshire. Where I live normally in Watertown, they're doing some work in the attic. I think it's insulation work they're doing, so I can't be in the house. My landlord set it up, and I'm in New Hampshire visiting my parents today. So I found a local hotel, and I'm in one of those soundproof booths, and I can't move 6 inches to my left or right now. So
Is that do all Sheratons have a soundproof booth in there?
I don't know. I'm glad they have it because I really had nowhere else to go this morning, but man, am I confined in here? Holy smokes.
Can you give us a tour?
You're looking at it. Hey, you see my hand?
Your kitty corner in there.
There's nowhere for me to go. There's nowhere for me to go. So
we're just in the middle of the podcast. We're just gonna see like towels come flying in, like the maids are just like thrown in.
Yeah, he's gonna have to I'm sorry, Brian. I'm glad you're not claustrophobic. I'm a little bit claustrophobic, so I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, no, it's not ideal, but we're gonna make way. What's also not ideal, Bridget and Scott, is when Scott, after this episode, takes off for Maine and the Bruins inevitably drop the news that they have officially hired Marco Sturm, which to this point obviously is not official news, but we can get into all of that. Of course, that news that speculation broke more so on Tuesday. We're recording on Thursday, but I'll just give you the quick lowdown on Tuesday afternoon. It was early Tuesday afternoon, around noon, actually. David Pagnotta of the Fourth Period reported the Bruins were in the final stage of their head coaching search, and that former Bruin Marco Sturm and former Edmonton Oilers head coach Jay Woodcroft were among remaining contenders. I know Mitch Love's name was thrown out there too. Later that night, around 10 p.m., Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects reported that he has heard Sturm is set to become the next head coach of the Boston Bruins. And that's kind of where things stand right now. I know that maybe Elliot Friedman said something the following day that, nothing's set in stone, but that's essentially the speculation we're going off of today.
Yeah, and I think they've made their decision. I think they just haven't announced it yet. So I think that's why we're in the danger zone here for recording and having to re-record later. So
yeah, I don't know that as of Wednesday they had made a final decision. Now maybe we're recording Thursday morning. Maybe Thursday morning is when that they're making it or did make it. But yeah, it was interesting to hear Elliot Friedman on 32 Thoughts on Wednesday morning, which I think that might have been recorded late Tuesday night after the Edmonton Dallas game. He said that they still had a meeting with Marco Sturm coming up. So whether that was either later Wednesday or even Thursday or Friday, they did meet with Woodcroft earlier this week, and I don't know, like people I've talked to, like I talked to someone like early in the day yesterday, Wednesday, and was pretty much told like there's not going to be a decision today. So that was like there wasn't even any doubt that they weren't at a final decision yet. So yeah, I don't know. It is curious because usually when you get these reports of it like really getting down to it, and then Cam Robinson throwing out there that they're going with Sturm, and I think Cam Robinson is really good. If people aren't familiar with him, he breaks a lot of news on prospects. So this would be kind of a little different for him. if he were the one to break a coaching hire, but he is tied into like AHL teams and sources. So Marcus Sturm obviously is an AHL coach until or unless he gets hired away. So, I like connecting dots. I was like, I could see how he would get the story. But then it never feels good as a reporter when you put something like that out there and then no one confirms it. No one confirms it. And now we're, like what, 36 hours past it and it's still just kind of dangling out there. So, yeah, like really interesting where it seemed what does seem clear is like they're down to the last couple candidates at the very least.
Do you think maybe if he had like a legitimate source on this, maybe the Bruins told, because Marco Sturm was up for other jobs as well. Like the Bruins job was not the only job he interviewed. Maybe they said, "Hey, you're our guy if this is the job you want," like, and let him make his decision.
I don't think they would tell him that. I think they would say, "You're our guy," and how do we get this done?
I guess true, but
like you don't. If you decide someone's your guy, you don't give them any choice to back out or go somewhere.
Yeah,
else.
but what if he said, "Oh, I still have one more interview left"?
Then you say, "What will it take to get you to cancel that interview?"
Yeah, I guess.
Like once you decide someone's your guy, you do everything you can to close the deal. You don't let him leave the building and travel to Seattle for an interview.
You bring him to Rail Stop and you get dinner and you you walk outside, you get a nice dinner, you say, "Let's sign this paper right now."
Yeah, I mean it. So yeah, so this is, as we sit here Thursday morning, not finalized yet. I predicted on our last episode that they will absolutely announce it while I'm away in Maine, Thursday or Friday. So I still 100% expect that. So, but yeah, look, I mean, we have all been on Team Sturm for a while. I still think he would be my leader in the clubhouse.
I think they're just following our off-season plan and our mock off-season. They're like, great idea. Step one.
Well, then they're going to make a lot of people unhappy because a lot of people did not like our off-season plans.
There aren't many off-season plans that all Bruins fans would agree on, like we talked about. So I mean, and that's just that's a product of where the Bruins are right now in their organization. They are a team that, because we've talked about it. I know they finished fifth last in the standings, but some of it was circumstantial. You had some key injuries, and then there was the literal tanking that they did after selling that got them to plummet to the fifth worst record. But with provided health next year and some bounce back performances from certain players and some key acquisitions, the Bruins they really should be fighting with some other bubble teams for the playoffs. It depends on what those personnel moves are, but there are those who think that the Bruins should just tear it all down and trade everybody and completely rebuild. There's those that think the Bruins aren't that far away, and the Bruins themselves don't plan on this being a long rebuild. So they have a lot of options that they can do this offseason, but there's no offseason plan that any fan, media member, or team member could lay out right now that everybody would universally agree on.
Well, I don't think there's anything in life that people universally agree on. I was talking about last episode, like if this was the year that Jack Eichel was up for a contract and hadn't signed an extension, and that would kind of be the home run. Like everybody probably looked to that as like, okay, great center, good on the power play, local guy, like that signing would have everything. But there's just not that option this year. And there's certainly, we got plenty of comments about people not being high on Mitch Marner as a guy that once he gets to the playoffs, like if you are a playoff team, which you should be a playoff team if you add him, but does he do enough for you in the playoffs for it to mean anything? And then you lock him down for 7 years and more money than Pasternak, then, it doesn't look like a good contract if his playoffs are not up to snuff, which people rightfully so have watched what he's done in Toronto, which has been a perennial playoff team, and haven't seen him do enough there.
Bridget, I just got to push back real quick, and I need Scott's help here. There have to be things that people universally agree on. I can't let that comment slide. Traffic. We could all agree traffic sucks, right? Let me know in the comments.
You find one weird that I was like,
agree
it's a
on.
great
No,
time.
I love traffic. I love just sitting in my car going nowhere.
Maybe like mosquitoes. Mosquitoes is like, most people don't like mosquitoes. I don't know. That's universally hate though. That's not universally like. I'm talking about universally like.
Yeah.
Dogs, like not even everybody likes dogs. I don't know why, but
I mean, I would say pizza, but then there's lactose intolerant and those that don't, and vegans and stuff. And mosquitoes is a good one, Bridget. Yeah. Can
you find something for universally like though?
That's like I had a friend growing up who didn't like chocolate, and I was like, for any kid to not like chocolate, that kind of broke it for me because I was like, that's insane. Like I didn't know anyone else who didn't like chocolate, and yet there you go, the one person who doesn't like chocolate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time here because now we'll do a tailspin. But in the comments, if you can think of something everybody universally likes or hates, please let us know. We need to know these.
Hates is easier, but likes money, right?
I'm sure there's an argument for everything. I'm sure there's an argument and a counter argument for everything.
But anyway, Patrice Bergeron, he's perfect. So
that's true.
Patrice Bergeron is pretty universally liked. I don't know if I've ever seen a bad comment about Patrice Bergeron. Now that I think of it, he could be the next. Well, I mean, he'd have to be the Prime Minister of Canada. We can't have him here, unfortunately. But why does he have citizenship here? I don't know.
He does, but I still think you have to be born here to be.
I think so. Yeah, I think he's. I don't know. I don't know. Clearly.
Yeah, but I mean, but bringing it back to coaching though, like we're talking about off-season plans and how there is no perfect path, and it's like, yeah, that's part of the reason this coaching hire is so important because it's the next coach is going to be asked to do sort of several different things, and like maybe this is worth getting into because I feel like we haven't done a whole lot of like, okay, once they hire this coach, like what's the checklist? Like, what do they actually have to do? And it's like, well, you got to build good relationships with Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak because they are the core guys that this next generation is being built around, and they're your best players. You got to establish relationships with Jeremy Swayman and goalie Bob, assuming you're keeping Bob Essenza on as goalie coach. We know Jeremy Swayman just had a good World Championships. He says he feels like a whole new goalie. Okay, let's make sure we have a plan to like keep that going into next season. Because again, getting Swayman on track is like the single most important thing that can happen for the Bruins this offseason, I think. And then there's working with young kids and figuring out a way to get more out of whoever is around, whether it's Patra, Minton, Lohrei, if Lysell gets a shot, whoever, like, this team needs young players to step up and maybe not be stars. That's probably asking too much, but be impactful players. So you need someone who's good at working with young players and can maximize whatever talent they do have. You need someone to reestablish a defensive identity that clearly was nowhere to be found to start last season, was there briefly when Sacco took over, and then disappeared again. That Don Sweeney has mentioned that as, something they need to get back to. And I would say, even if Sweeney hadn't highlighted that himself, like, clearly this team needs to play better defense and have more structure. So there's so much that, and like, that's not even getting into like, do they need to make the playoffs or how far do they have to go? That's just like, here's what needs to be prioritized over the summer into training camp, building up to opening night.
Yeah, the good news is that if it is Sturm, he's been developing guys at the AHL level, which oftentimes those guys are fresh out of college. You get a combination of guys that have been there a while and that are kind of like career AHLers, and then you got the guys that go back and forth, and then you got those really like fresh young guys that have not been polished at all, right? Like, say just to give an example for the Bruins, like Don Schmellis just came right from UMass to Providence, and like the first professional experience he had is in the AHL, and like trying to get him up to professional speed is what they did in Providence, what Marco Sturm is tasked with doing with the Ontario Reign in the AHL over the last few seasons as the head coach there. So he's at least got that experience right there for some of those younger guys. We talked about it. The bottom six is going to be pretty young, we think, because if they do want to go out and spend the money on a top six forward and or maybe two, maybe two middle six forwards, they're going to end up with a pretty young bottom six that probably includes Minton and Patra, or I mean, even Huznadinov is still very young. And there's a little bit of a language barrier there, so that could be interesting. Though they have Nikita Zadorov for that. Like, I could tell that Huznadinov definitely leans on him for like, he looks at him like when people say stuff, and he's like, I have no idea what's going on. But that actually is a pretty good asset because Zadorov's actually he's pretty good with his English. So, but yeah, there's so many young players, so that's certainly the person who takes over should be someone who can help bring confidence out of those guys. I mean, Fabian Lysell maybe feels like the system so far has like overlooked him. Maybe Patra feels like that a little bit too, because he's been sent down a few times, though I think his confidence probably still is a little bit more there than Lysell's. Trying to think, Brian, what do you think that the next head coach needs to do, like right off the bat coming in? What impression do they need to make? What is the most important thing for them to do, say, in the first month of coming in?
It's a good question. I think that from an X's and O's perspective, I need to see more of the roster come the fall, because there's definitely a lot of strategic things that need to change, especially on their special teams. Their special teams have to improve. But as far as this summer, what can they do? I think it's reestablishing the culture that Marco Sturm himself was part of building from late 05 to late 2010 before he was traded, when he was riddled with injuries. He did not win a Stanley Cup with the Boston Bruins. He was traded about 6 months prior, but he was very much a part of that championship culture that they eventually built. And I think there's something symbolic that 15 years later, he has an opportunity unofficially. Well, I guess I'll reserve that until he's officially hired, but it appears he may have an opportunity 15 years later to help be a part of building that culture again in Boston, this time as a head coach. So I think that when you're somebody who's younger and has, like Sturm is compared to many coaches around the league, somebody who's played in the league relatively recent. I mean, Marco Sturm was playing, I think, his final game for maybe the Florida Panthers, maybe in 2012, 2013. We're only talking just over a decade ago he was in the league. So he has that relatability. And I just think that him, along with, Zdeno Chara is around the organization right now. Patrice Bergeron's around the organization right now in an ambassador role. I wouldn't be surprised if the two of them had increased roles as time goes on, where you see Marco Sturm, Patrice Bergeron, Zdeno Chara, Tuukka Rask is around as an ambassador. Adam McQuaid is in player development. So I think that right now, Don Sweeney and Cam Neely are looking around and saying, we have individuals in the organization that have done it as players. They've built a championship culture as players when the culture in 2005 was not great. And I just think that they have confidence that maybe those guys can do it again in leadership roles as non-players. So I think it's not just going to be on Marco Sturm individually. He's going to have some help around him in a support system. But I do think that Marco Sturm can come in and demand tempo and practice from his players. He can demand accountability with his players. And I just think that the culture needs to improve, because they lost a lot of leadership in Brad Marchand and obviously Charlie Coyle and Brendan Carlo. No, they were never the last two guys I mentioned, they were never part of a championship team in Boston, but they certainly were good leaders. So the Bruins need to reestablish their identity as an organization. And I think that from a management perspective and a coaching perspective, Marco Sturm would be a good candidate to do just that.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, it's such a big part of, especially with a younger team, right? Like, Jim Montgomery didn't have to do that as much. He comes in with a veteran team that, I mean, Montgomery even admitted himself, like, there were times that season, that record-setting 22-23 regular season, where it was like, he kind of just had to be hands off, like, just don't get in the way. Like, that team had it. They already had the leadership. Just, some messaging that needed changing. Yeah, this is a very different situation than that was. That was an older team, as it turns out, trying to make one last run. And then Montgomery did have to inherit a different looking team, or did have to lead a different looking team the next season. But it's a totally different spot now. Like you mentioned it, all that leadership out the window. All the veterans out the window. Like, this is going to be, it's a young team. It's going to have new leaders who at least haven't worn a C before. Depending on who they add, I guess in theory they could maybe bring someone in who has. But yeah, new, like, second layer of leadership. And you're right, coming off a season where it felt like that culture kind of slipped away and that identity slipped away. So often last season we saw them just unable to get back on track, unable to stop the bleeding, whether that was in game or even game to game with losing streaks piling up. Those are all things that in the past, it was like you had confidence that they knew how to stop the bleeding. They knew how to put their foot down and say, okay, that's enough. Like, now we close out this game. Now we end this, we don't lose 3 in a row. We get going. We start playing the right way for, get ourselves a good 2-3 week stretch. And they can never do that last year. They can never get themselves out of it. So, and part of that is talent, but part of it is that culture and identity and guys kind of holding each other accountable and being able to pull themselves out. And they may very well need the new head coach to be part of that process, because you have some guys in that room who, quite frankly, might not know how to do it, or maybe haven't even done it before. So, having someone who's played and been a part of it and been, out with a good organization in LA, like, I think that is something that Sturm could do. By all accounts, he's extremely well respected by his players, which doesn't necessarily mean he's, quote unquote players coach. I think he is to an extent, but I also think he's an all business type of guy.
But who he also is familiar with is the market, the Bruins fans. When Marco Sturm came to Boston, Joe Thornton was traded back in November of 2005. Marco Sturm was a piece of the package that Boston received, and the trade, straight up on paper at the time, and as you look back at it now, was not a great trade for the Boston Bruins. Clearly, Joe Thornton went on to be an MVP player that season, and whilst ultimate success eluded him in San Jose, that trade certainly on paper was not a win for the Boston Bruins. But one of the bright things to come from it was Marco Sturm. And as I said a few minutes ago, he entered the Bruins organization in arguably their darkest hour, certainly in recent memory at the time. And he took the ice at what back then I think was TD Bank North Garden, and in front of 7,000 empty yellow seats. And along with Patrice Bergeron and Marc Savard and Brad Boyes and Zdeno Chara, Tim Thomas, Andrew Ferentz, Dennis Weidman, like that group of guys eventually, they had to suffer through the 06-07 season, but in 07-08, we all know that that's the season that put the Bruins back on the map, and it was their blue collar work ethic. It was the drama of forcing Montreal to 7. Montreal beat the Bruins 8 times that regular season. They were 8-0 against Boston in the regular season. Then they were up 3-1 in the series. The Bruins fight back, and all of a sudden the city is believing in what the Bruins have started to build. And the following year they win the East, and then 2 years later they win the Cup. So Marco Sturm has seen that. He knows what the expectations are from the fans in Boston. He knows what fans in the market expect of their players, and beyond winning, it's work ethic and compete, because every fan base wants their team to win a Stanley Cup championship. But that's obviously not realistic every single year. What you can expect every year is compete, and I do think that Sturm, certainly Bergeron and Chara, if they end up having increased roles within the organization, they know that as well. A guy like Chris Kelly knows that too, right? Who was on the Bruins bench last year, but Kelly, not for nothing, he entered the trade deadline. He entered the Bruins during the trade deadline the year they won the Cup. So he wasn't really a part of building that culture. He was a part of the eventual culture that got there. And so I don't know. I just think there's a difference there as well. I think the experience Sturm had as a player, seeing Boston at rock bottom and being with them right up until pretty much they were Stanley Cup champions, I think there's a lot of merit in that.
And I'm glad you brought up Kelly, because I've been thinking about this the whole time today and other times we've had this conversation, especially once we heard the narrowed down names. What do you think the Bruins should do with the coaching staff that is currently there, right? Because Jay Leach and Joe Sacco, those are guys that were interviewed and part of this process. We don't think Chris Kelly was. Do you think that what's best is for the Bruins to get a clean slate? And if they don't decide on adding those two guys, just put in largely new staff? Or do you think it's more beneficial for them to say Leach stays as the assistant, Sacco goes back to an assistant, Kelly could still stay in that situation because they were down an assistant last year once they fired, or they're down a guy on the bench last year once they fired Montgomery? Do you have a strong feeling either way what they should do with those guys?
My strong feeling is you need to let the head coach decide. You need to give him the power to put together his own staff. And if he wants to lean on Don Sweeney and Cam Neely and say, hey, tell me about these guys, and, I'll listen, and maybe I'm going to keep all of them or one of them or a couple of them. That's if those guys even want to stay. Joe Sacco's been here a long time and gets a shot as interim head coach, but assuming he doesn't get this head coaching job, which we don't think he is, does he want to stay here, or does he feel like, hey, if I really want to be a head coach again in the NHL, not interim head coach on a bad team, I got to go somewhere else and prove myself. How does Jay Leach feel? He's only been back 1 year, but I'm sure he, in his mind, had eyes on potentially someday being Bruins head coach. And I think there's people in the Bruins organization who view him that way, even if he doesn't get it this time. But is he going to feel passed over? Is he going to want to go somewhere else? Either way, though, I think whether, again, if it's Sturm or Woodcroft, whoever, you can't have an arranged marriage. You can't force them to work with assistant coaches that they might not want, or they might have someone else in mind, but, can't bring him in because he coaches defense and so does Jay Leach. So I guess I have to stick with Jay Leach. You can't I just don't think it's a good idea, good situation to try to force that on a new head coach. You have to give him some leeway to pick his guys. And I would also say, I think whoever the new head coach is, I think you need a new power play voice and a new set of eyes on the power play, no matter what. Obviously if you hire a head coach where that's his strength and a specialty, that helps. And maybe that covers it. But Marco Sturm, power plays he's been in charge of have not been very good. So that's not really his strength. So I think no matter what, you should be looking for someone who has that as a strength, because it's not just last year. It was the end of the previous season that the power play was also stale and ineffective. and just performing way below where it should have been with the talent level on the ice. So I would say no matter what, you need a fresh set of eyes there.
You know what's funny, Scott, is when it comes to power play coaches, I just feel like power plays are less is more. The more simple you keep it, it's not rocket science. You have an extra guy on the ice, you have an extra skater to outnumber your opposition on loose pucks. Pucks and bodies to the net. I'm not trying to be cliche, but when people try to overcomplicate power plays, I think that's when teams run into trouble. When you just play the game in front of you and let your natural instincts take over, don't wait 45 seconds to get your first shot in the power play or a minute and a half. You have to put a ton of emphasis on winning the face-off. So make sure your wingers, your defensemen, whomever, because it's not just center on center. Make sure you're winning that opening face-off, so that you're not icing the puck and wasting the first 30 seconds. When you do win the face-off, you have to get pucks to the net early and often, get the PKers out of position, and then those seams open up. We've talked about it a million times. And when they do ice the puck, yeah, you have to have some strategy when it comes to transitioning into the offensive zone. But I just think power play coaches, man, it's that's the problem half the time is these players are overcoached. This guy in a bumper, you got to move back this amount of feet when this guy gets the puck, and this guy that's net front, go behind the goal line. Just play the game in front of you. Like, you have an extra guy, they don't know how to play hockey. You want to be organized, but you don't want to be overwhelming with information. I feel like sometimes, I don't know, I just think the most effective power plays are the ones where you have a guy at the top of the blue line that can walk the line appropriately and get pucks through, and you have that strong net front presence. You're not going to have a successful power play if you're banking on David Pastrnak one-timing it in every time. It's just not how it works. You'll get that once in a while, but I just think power plays tend to be overcoached sometimes. But you're right, absolutely, Scott, about you should enable whoever you hire as the next head coach to bring in their own staff. My question is I wonder how strong of a Rolodex somebody like Marco Sturm would even have. And logistically, if he did have some favorites in mind, are they working international? Are they working in the AHL? Do they even want to leave the organization? I wonder what Sturm's Rolodex looks like. But I do absolutely agree with the sentiment of allowing the head coach to bring in his own people, because he's Marco Sturm. Don Sweeney is the general manager of the Boston Bruins. Marco Sturm is the general manager of the Boston Bruins bench, and he has two people underneath him, and he needs to delegate, and he needs to have a comfortable relationship with those people and have trust in them that they're going to carry out what the vision is for him, for his hockey team. So you're only as a manager, you're only as good as the people around you, and the people that you have to be good at delegating, and you have to be good at you have to be good at your job, but it is the people around you as well. And when you're forced to work with people, sometimes there's happy accidents. People get hired all the time for manager positions in the real world, and they don't just get to fire the people below them and bring in their own people. They have to work with who preceded them. And sometimes those relationships end up great. But in this situation, it's not. Professional sports isn't always like the real world. So I do think it would be nice to give Marco Sturm the power to bring in his own people if he is their head coaching hire.
Well, he knows Kelly. Like, Chris Kelly and him are certainly know each other. And I'm not sure about how much they've worked together, if at all. I feel like
they never crossed paths though. Like, I'm sure obviously they're familiar with each other, but
I wonder what his familiarity is with the Bruins coaching staff. So that's interesting to say as well. And when you talk about, what's his Rolodex, it's like, well, if he wants to go outside the box with an assistant coach, like, does Don Sweeney want to have a say in that? And like, oh, hey, maybe that idea isn't, that doesn't necessarily fit what we were looking for, kind of thing. I don't know. And maybe stability, like keeping at least one of those guys makes for, maybe an easier transition. Or my thought is that, a fresh slate could be good after what happened last year.
Yeah, I mean, like, not to be crass about it, but like who on the coaching staff did enough to just automatically keep their job? Like
Bob Asenza thinks he'll leave. Like
yeah,
Bob
I mean,
Asenza.
like I assume there's enough respect there that you know, I don't think you're throwing Bob Asenza out just because of one down season in the goaltending department. Um, although you know, Don Sweeney did kind of take a pot shot at the goaltending in his end of season press conference when he said, you know, usually it's the goaltending excellence department, and this season it was the goaltending not so excellent. Um, but yeah, I mean, like Chris Kelly, big focus for him is special teams. Special teams stunk last year. Jay Leach was in charge of the defense. I just said it. Like they had about one good month of defensive hockey last season. And like I know that's not all his fault. Like you missed Hampus Lindholm for most of the season, Charlie McAvoy for a good chunk of it in the second half. But like you can't ignore the coaching either. You can't just be like, oh, not his fault at all. Like I don't know, you have your hands on it, and there weren't really many signs of improvement. So I think that's fair to be critical. You know, and Joe Sacco again, like thrown into a tough situation, but after a decent first, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, team started letting go of the rope. Like I still don't fully understand what happened coming out of that Christmas break where they were playing legitimately good hockey. Yes, there was still a talent deficiency, but like they were playing good hockey going into Christmas, and they came out of it with just like an absolutely abysmal 3-week stretch. And it's like, yeah, you can look at coaching for that and like ask what role that played in it. So I don't look. I think everyone on the Bruins coaching staff has strengths and weaknesses, and I think they're all smart guys. I think they would work hard to try to be part of the solution. I'm just saying, like, none of them should be stone cold locks to keep their job here.
Well, and Jay Leach also didn't have a perfect tenure in Seattle. I mean, was it his most recent year in Seattle before he came back to Boston? It was the year before, but Seattle's defense was terrible. So I mean,
Yeah.
I think it was his most recent in Seattle. So his last 2 seasons coaching in the NHL, in an assistant coaching capacity, his defense hasn't showed up well. Again, it's not all on him, but I mean, if we're
Right.
talking
And
about
like, and
pedigree and
like there is also a track record of success there because when he first got to Seattle, they were a good defensive team. Like that's how they made the playoffs. That was the good thing they had going. That was their identity, was they were defensive, low scoring games, structure, all that. And like it did work for a little while, but you're absolutely right. Eventually it got away and it was gone.
yeah, like everybody's vulnerable here, in my opinion. Like nobody's track record is so strong that they are irreplaceable. And I don't think anybody here is suggesting that. And I don't think fans are suggesting that. I love Chris Kelly. As a Bruins fan, I'm forever thankful for all of his efforts with the Boston Bruins, especially in the latter half of the 2011 season. And he was instrumental in the Bruins coming back in round 1 against the Canadians, and along with his line mates, Rich Peverley and Michael Ryder. But here we are in 2025, and he's not done a good job as their power play assistant coach mainly. And we have to judge him on that. Like it's business. We'd love to say, hey, he won a cup with us. Let's keep him forever. But okay, we all get judged in life on our performances. So I don't know who those assistant coach candidates would be if they gave the reins to the new head coach. But in any event, do we have any more commentary on Sturm and the head coaching situation currently? I know it's going to break in about an hour when Scott leaves, but
Yeah, that'll be Woodcroft too, just because we spent a chunk of time on Sturm. It'll be someone else.
I'm gonna really drill it down. I think it breaks as I'm driving over. I forget the name of it, but the bridge that goes from New Hampshire into Maine. I think I'm gonna be on that bridge when it breaks.
I mean, let me just get ahead of it right now, just in case. Bridget, we've talked so much about Sturm in this episode. Even if it broke, I don't know what else we would really say. So I'll just put this out here just in case. Yeah, this is in case the Boston Bruins hire Marco Sturm later today. This episode counts. We don't have to do an emergency recording.
Yeah.
The Boston Bruins have officially hired head coach Marco Sturm, in parentheses, unofficially. But I just had to put that out there. So
yeah, I think we should, but if it's Woodcroft, then we're like, well.
Oh God! Then we burn the audio, and this never happened, and I was never in solitary confinement. That's for sure.
Yeah, I don't know what
That's
you did to get there, but
I don't know. I actually got recess time in a few minutes, so we got to wrap this up pretty soon. But did you guys have any?
They're gonna be sliding Brian's lunch through the mail slip any minute now.
Yeah, my one phone call is gonna go to Scott in 2 hours when they do hire Sturm, just to let him know. Did you guys have any takeaways regarding the NHL playoffs right now? Obviously, the Florida Panthers have advanced to their third straight Stanley Cup final. That is now 6 consecutive Stanley Cup final appearances for the state of Florida. 3 in a row by Tampa from 2020 to 2022, and now 3 from the Panthers from 23 to 25. That means that Brad Marchand is now going to his 4th Stanley Cup final in his career. To this point, he is 1-2, as we all painfully know. The 2-part. What are you guys' thoughts on how the Eastern Conference Finals shook out and the remainder of the NHL playoff landscape?
Not surprising. I thought going in, the Panthers were clearly a better team than Carolina. They have more star power. I think they play a more complete game. They're more physical. That I said it beforehand. Like Carolina's only chance was if Freddie Anderson continued to stand on his head, which he had in the first 2 rounds, and that did not happen. In fact, he struggled so much that he got pulled at one point. They started Kachekov for a game. So yet another season where goaltending ultimately lets down Carolina, which has been a theme for them for a long, long time. Not that it was only on goaltending. I think the Panthers are winning that series almost no matter what, especially when Bobrovsky does play well for them for the most part. He let in, I would say, 2 soft ones in Game 5 Wednesday night, and yet Florida still comes roaring back and wins that game to finish off the series. So yeah, it's really frustrating. If in a way, it almost takes some pressure off, because I think if the Bruins were closer to contention, we'd be having this discussion of like, how do you get past the Panthers? How do you build a team to get past the Panthers? We had that discussion last year. The Bruins made moves that they thought were going to make them tougher, bigger, harder to play against. And instead, they just ended up being a worse team, period. Obviously, didn't work, wasn't the right way to go. In a way, I almost feel like we don't have to have that discussion, because the Bruins aren't a contender right now, and they're not expected to be a contender next year. And so, and obviously, there are different pressures with this retool. Like, you still have to get things right. But it's almost like, hey, maybe by the time you're ready to compete again, the Panthers, some of their veterans are, on the downside. They've had to move on from some guys for cap reasons. Like, the NHL is not designed to keep a team together for a dynasty. We saw that with Tampa. They had to start making some tough decisions after those back-to-back cups, 3 straight finals appearances. The Panthers will as well. Like, they're, they're gonna. So their big unrestricted free agents after this year are Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, Aaron Ekblad. They're definitely going to have to lose one of them. They can't afford to keep all 3. And it's possible they lose 2 of them. Like, they might just have to pick one of those guys. So, like, there's going to be some turnover, but they do have so much of that core locked up in Barkov, Reinhart, Kachuk, Verhaeghe, Forsling, like, obviously Bobrovsky. It's
Lundell, Rinen.
Yeah, like, it is daunting to try to figure out, like, how does anyone talk to that? Every team in the East is having the same discussions. Tampa thought they took a step forward this year. They go in 5. Carolina feels like they're right there every year. The last 2 times they've played Florida in the playoffs, they've won a total of 1 game. Like, it's so tough. They are so good. Obviously, Toronto, like, whether it's the Bruins or Florida, they're shaking their head at the end of every season. But yeah, it is very clearly Florida's conference to to be in charge of right now.
Yeah, that game, you know what that game reminded me of too last night, which I know it wasn't a game 7, but it was a, an elimination game. So, it reminded me of 2 playoffs ago. The last year that Bergeron and Krejci were on the team. Game 7, the Bruins have a lead. Like there's I guess there was a few times in that series that the Bruins had a lead, and then you knew Florida was going to push. Like they always have a push. And so last night Carolina's up 2-0 after the first period, doing everything right, and then next thing you know, Florida's up 3-2, and then Carolina ties it. But it always felt like Florida was going to get that winning goal, and they did. They scored it in regulation against the Bruins. It was in overtime, but you kind of knew it was coming anyway. Like I think we all just had a sense that Florida had it in them, and Carolina didn't. And in the case of the game I'm comparing it to, it kind of felt like Florida was going to be the game 7 winner, and they were. So yeah, it's had some similarities to me because of just how difficult Florida is even when their back's against the wall. And that probably has a good chunk to do with coaching, and as well as obviously the talented roster that they have. But Paul Maurice did an interview in the first intermission with TNT, and he was just like, yeah, we're just, we're not worrying about it. It's just, we're just, we just know we can come back from this, whatever. Like, it just seems like they're so calm in those situations. And obviously they're the team that's up. It's not a game 7, so the pressure wasn't quite as much on them, but they always find a way to make a game interesting. It feels they have a lot of different ways they can do it. So they're a tough team to get past. And we thought that Zadorov and Lindholm would help the Bruins do that. Turns out they didn't get a chance to try and avenge the last 2 seasons that the Panthers knocked them out.
Yeah, I mean, Zadorov and Lindholm were the last of the Bruins' problems last year. To be honest, they were front and center because of the contracts they signed. But I know you're not saying that.
I'm saying that they added them in hopes that would help give the Bruins an edge against them in the playoffs. But then they don't even get the chance to see there was a point in the season where I remember being like, even though Zadorov and Lindholm in particular wasn't doing well, I remember saying, well, we don't know if it's a success, right, until we see what it looks like in the playoffs, because that's really what we're waiting for, and we never got to see it. So,
but I'll be honest, guys, if the Bruins do make the playoffs, or did last year, or do next year, I still see the concept, and of Zadorov and Lindholm being good in the playoffs. In fact, the next time the Bruins do make the playoffs, assuming it's in the next couple of years, hopefully next year, I would bet that they would be good playoff performers. Because I do think that they would perform the way that the Bruins hope that they would, because they are hard players to play against and are not necessarily flashy. But as it pertains to the Florida Panthers, it is tough enough to beat them. You cannot beat yourself along the way. Jesperi Kotkaniemi with a boneheaded, lazy holding penalty when they're up 2-0. He is, by the way, for all the headaches that he's caused throughout the league with the offer sheets with Carolina and Montreal, and he, to me, is not a very smart player. But he goes off for a hold. Florida makes it 2-1. Next thing you know, like Bridges said, it's 3-2. And then when Carolina did have a chance to take the lead after they tied it, Kotkaniemi had the puck in a stick and an open net and just didn't have a chance to get the shot off. And I don't know, he just seemed clumsy up and down the ice. So you can't beat yourselves. And when it comes to Florida, they just have, at this point, so much believability and confidence in themselves, regardless of the situation. They could be up 3-0 in a series or down 3-0 in a series, up in a game, down in a game. It doesn't matter. Their experience and their believability in themselves, which at one point didn't exist. They used to not have that pedigree behind their logo, but they did always have that relentlessness, and they were always opportunistic. And so you add relentlessness plus an opportunistic approach, plus the confidence of knowing that they've been there and they've done that, and they aren't going to be fazed by anything. It's a dangerous and scary team. And I think their biggest enemy right now going forward in the Eastern Conference isn't so much another team. It's the war of attrition that I think will eventually come to them, which is, that was the only way I saw them not making the finals this year. Looking around at the Eastern Conference, even before the playoffs, was if Matthew Tkachuk was just too banged up, and he might still be pretty hurt. But if the Panthers got too hurt, I could see somebody taking advantage of them. But I was surprised, and I'm not trying to throw a shade here. And Scott, I know that you picked Tampa. I was surprised to see how many people picked the Lightning over Florida. This Florida team is so deep. I think maybe people were looking at the thing I just said, attrition. Maybe they thought that Florida was banged up and didn't have what it took. But man, they are deep. They're relentless. They're disciplined. They're very, very sneakily dirty. But everybody is at this time of year. So I just think what they've built is so impressive to go to the Cup Finals 3 straight years. What a team. And Sasha Barkov, what a player he is.
It's so he's the most complete center in the game today by a lot. Like, not necessarily best. Obviously, Connor McDavid is better, but most complete just in terms of the details and doing everything right. And like you almost like forget how physically dominant he can be, because he's not the biggest hitter and he's not the kind of toned setter that way that like Sam Bennett is, or even Tkachuk. But like you see it on that goal that he sets up in game 5, where just the total power forward move, holding off Orlov, who, by the way, Dmitry Orlov, what a brutal series he had. As
Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof.
Yeah. Like, but just a total power forward move. And you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Like he's incredibly smart and responsible, and also like good luck getting him off the puck. But yeah, like I think Greg Wyshynski on Twitter put it at one point. He said, like, it's been a while since we've seen a more blood in the water type of team, like team that just sees any sign of weakness and just swarms like sharks, like just all over it. And that's exactly what happened last night. Like Bridget, you said, it's like Carolina's up 2-0, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they're down 3-2, and it's like, what the hell happened? Like, how did that happen? Like, and it's because Florida sees that opening and they just smash that down the door and run through. Yeah, it's you can hate them, and we all do here in Boston, but it certainly is impressive to watch.
Yep, and there's going to be one more series that we watch them, and I don't know if our viewers are rooting against them or rooting for them, for Marchand, or what they think of the Panthers and their rooting interest in the finals. Maybe you're just a hockey fan, you're just watching it because you want to see what happens and you just want to see good hockey. But yeah, I'm sure there's a chunk of people that are just want to see Marchand get a little bit of a payoff after what was a really difficult first part of the season when he was in Boston. Things got a little bit better for him when he left. So it's hard to see him wearing the Panthers jersey, but he could win a cup.
Well, and Brian, you're right about health too. And like, yeah, maybe Tkachuk still isn't 100%, but Panthers have stayed healthy through this postseason, which is, no one ever wants to talk about it because injuries can just be an excuse, but it's an important part of this every single year. And Florida now is going to get at least 1 week off, and possibly even a week and a half off if the Western Conference Finals goes a couple more games. They're going to enter that series healthy. Luster-Reinen left game 5, but I saw Paul Maurice after said he thinks he'll be fine. And then, like, you look, if say Edmonton advances, they just lost Zach Hyman for the rest of the playoffs. That's a big loss for them. They still don't have Matthias Ekholm back. It sounds like he might be back for the finals if they get there. It seems like he's close, but what percentage is he going to be at? Like, that's, it is part of the story. I mean, the year the Panthers lost in the final to Vegas, they had no chance because they just had so many injuries pile up by that point. Like, Tkachuk was hurt, Ekblad was hurt, I think Barkov was hurt. Like, and some of those guys tried to play through it to varying degrees, but yeah, like when injuries do start to pile up, it's like that becomes a decisive factor this late in the playoffs. So them at least starting the series healthy is huge.
And a lot of it's stylistically, but a lot of it's also luck. And what I mean by that is stylistically, the Florida Panthers gain a lot of respect out there. They gain a lot of room out there because of the way they play against their opponents. Their opponents constantly feel like they are being hunted rather than they're hunting. And while, yes, it's true, you can get hurt by being an aggressor. I mean, you saw AJ Greer the other night. He hurt himself and he was trying to hit Jordan Stahl, and he hit him pretty good, but Greer gets hurt. So I'm not saying that when you're the more aggressive physical team that you can't get hurt, especially when you're as a byproduct of throwing those hits. But I just think that generally speaking, when you are playing on your toes more so than your opponent, you're dictating the tempo. You're kind of dictating where the play is going, and the physicality is more on your terms. That said, there's dumb luck with not getting injured as well. Hampus Lindholm took a pretty ordinary NHL shot from distance, hit him in the right spot in his knee in November, out for the season. So you can be a relentless team like Florida. You can be professional. You can be opportunistic. You can be blue collar and experienced, and still get a puck to an uncomfortable spot and be out for the season or the playoffs. And to this point, that's evaded Florida. So yeah, the Hyman injury is tough for the Oilers, assuming that they get through Dallas. They're up 3-1 in that series right now. I do think that top to bottom, Florida is the better roster than the Oilers. I think that Edmonton's going to have to really win a Stanley Cup on the back of McDavid and Draisaitl, and those two players, McDavid in particular, just refusing to be denied of a Stanley Cup for a second consecutive season against the same team. But I do think Florida is the better team, top to bottom. Of course, Edmonton still has work to do against Dallas, though.
Yeah, and I'd say
Right, well,
either goalie capable of imploding as well. Like Bobrovsky's been good for the most part this postseason. He's had tough stretches, even last year in the Stanley Cup final when Florida opened that door for Edmonton to come back and force a Game 7. And obviously, Stuart Skinner is like about as volatile a goalie as you can get. So always an adventure there. But that's obviously going to play a role as well.
And if you're a believer in home ice, I think that would be flipped this time around. If Edmonton plays Florida, I think the Oilers would have home ice this year.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure.
So if there was a Game 7, it would be in oil country. But that's jumping the gun just a little bit. Bridget and Scott, I think that wraps up for this episode, unless you had any final thoughts. But we're approaching an hour, and Scott.
I say one last refresh of the emails and the Twitter. Anything
yeah,
new?
nothing yet.
Anything,
I will just quickly plug. I talked to James Hagens, Boston College forward. Probable top 5 pick, but potential option for the Bruins at 7 if he falls. Talked to him on Tuesday. Wrote up an article for weei.com. If people want to go check that out, I thought. I'd say my takeaway was it was good to hear him talk about compete level and how that's like the number one thing he wants to convey to teams at the NHL Combine next week in Buffalo. Because I've said it before, like I think I saw him as more of a battler than a lot of people seem to give him credit for this season at BC. Like there seems to be this notion that he's like a softer perimeter style player. And I will say, like, he can stay on the perimeter too much at times as a playmaker because he just likes to survey the ice and look for teammates to get inside. So, like, that's fair, but I don't think he's soft. Like, I do think he has more compete, and he talked about it quite a bit. So that's in the article.
Yeah, I agree, Scott. That's my observation too. In transition, I think he's a little bit perimeter heavy, but in the corners, he's absolutely sticking his nose in there and giving little rabbit cross checks to the back of guys, or their ribs or whatever. Like, and I know that sounds petty, but like those are some of the battle things that you don't necessarily see a soft player doing. Like he does have that bite to his game.
I know.
So yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know. I said this in the draft episode that we did, the mock draft episode. But he does come out of the corners with a lot of pucks. Like he comes off the wall with pucks, even if he didn't have possession when he went in there. And he was on a great team and a great line, but he was very much keeping up, and I thought was really good with possession, whether he already had the puck or was retrieving the puck. So I think he should go top 5. Honestly, if he fell to the Bruins, that would be a home run, but he's not going to end up there, I don't think. So he, at the beginning of the college season, was projected number 1. He now will probably go in the top 3, top 5. And yeah, I don't think the Bruins, unfortunately, see, if the ping pong balls had bounced a different way, we could be talking about Hagens right now. And we could have a whole episode about, Hagens, spoke to the media and this is who the Bruins could be looking at. But I just feel like we would be, we'd be doing that if the ping pong balls were 1 through 5 and not necessarily 7. So.
By the way, just real quick, there was a game recently between Caleb Desrosiers of the Moncton Wildcats and the Q in the Memorial Cup tournament against Gavin McKenna. I'm blanking on McKenna's city that he plays for.
Medicine Hat.
Thank you. And Caleb Desrosiers is somebody we've talked about. He's projected to go certainly top 10, but he could, again, like many players in this draft class, they've been projected to go as high as, maybe 3 or 4 or 7 or 8 or 9, whatever. But certainly one of the better prospects in this draft class, according to rankings. And we've talked very highly of the player. Still do, still would. You watch Gavin McKenna in that game, and it's like, oh my God, like McKenna is he's just in a different stratosphere than every other player on the ice, his team, the opponents, and that includes one of the higher projected picks in this coming draft. And who knows how these players pan out in time in the NHL. But man, is Gavin McKenna a special prospect. I'm very fascinated to see where he ends up in, I guess it would be just over a year we would find out who drafts him. So
yeah,
but wow, I don't know if you guys caught any of that action.
A little bit, yeah. He's a ton of fun to watch.
It's jarring. It's like it jumps right off the screen at you. It's like, oh my God, it's insane. It's insane.
I'm interested to see who finishes in the bottom 5 next year because once again, timing wasn't great for the Bruins to have this bottom 5 season.
I have my guesses. My dark horse right now would be a team that the Boston Bruins may or may not have beaten in the 2011 Stanley Cup Finals. I see some dark days for them, and there's some chatter about the Canucks I want to get to later in the offseason as well. But Scott, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I know you have a drive ahead of you, so Bridget and myself possibly will hop back on at some point today or tomorrow if there's news to break. If not, then everybody have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.